Good morning. I am Kikanza Nuri Robbins, and I am your worship associate for the morning. I serve on the bioethics committee of a large hospital here in Los Angeles. And on that committee, we grapple with the ethics of living and dying. Sometimes we have to remind families, and sometimes we have to remind healthcare givers that both birth and death are natural processes, and there is grace in remembering that. Audre Lorde, who described herself as a Black, lesbian, mother, warrior, poet, dedicated her life and her creative talent to confronting the injustices of racism, sexism, classism, heterosexism, and homophobia. And if she lived 10 years longer, she probably would have added the term transphobia to her list. She died in 1994 of breast cancer at the age of 58. She reminds us of the graces found in living and dying in A Litany for Survival, which is a poem that can be found as a reading in our gray hymnal, number 587. And she writes, "For those of us who live at the shoreline, standing upon the constant edges of decision, crucial and alone. For those of us who cannot indulge the passing dreams of choice, who live in doorways coming and going in the hours between dawns, looking inward and outward, at once before and after, seeking a now that can breed futures like bread in our children's mouths, so their dreams will not reflect the death of ours. For those of us who were imprinted with fear, like a faint line in the center of our foreheads, learning to be afraid with our mother's milk. For by this weapon, this illusion of some safety to be found, the heavy-footed hoped to silence us. For all of us, this instant and this triumph, we were never meant to survive. When the sun rises, we are afraid it might not remain. When the sun sets, we are afraid it might not rise in the morning. When our stomachs are full, we are afraid of indigestion. When our stomachs are empty, we are afraid we may never eat again. When we are loved, we are afraid love will vanish. When we are alone, we are afraid love will never return. And when we speak, we are afraid our words will not be welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak remembering. We were never meant to survive. Hafiz is an honorific term that's given to people who have memorized the entire Quran. It's like remembering all the Bible verses. So the Hafiz that you may be familiar with was a 14th century Persian mystic and poet. He reminds us that even in these uncertain times, we must remember to honor the space that we are in. This is what he says. Now is the time. Now is the time to know that all you do is sacred. Now, why not consider a lasting truth with yourself and life? Now is the time to understand that all your ideas of right and wrong were just a child's training wheels to be laid aside when you can finally live with veracity and love. Now is the time for the world to know that every thought and action is sacred. Now is the time for you to compute the impossibility that there is anything but grace. Now is the season to know that everything you do is sacred. I light the chalice. This service is only an hour long, but it takes many, many hours of work and many, many people to produce the service. I'd like to acknowledge some of them now. Tam, Pam Teplitz and Liz Fuller produce the slides and make sure that we get online on time and that we stay online without a lot of technological glitches. And you know that if sometimes you can't see on Facebook, somebody will put in the chat box, go to YouTube or go take this link. That's Pam and Liz doing that for us. Ryan Humphrey provides our instrumental music, and we get to see him in our prelude and our postlude, and we sometimes get to hear him in between. Our section leaders and guest musicians provide music that Sonder Choi, our music director, both directs and produces. Sonder is also on the tech team, and he's the one that connects all of the segments of the services into one seamless flow. Cleo Anderson is our amazing director of religious exploration, and our minister, the Reverend Jeremiah Callanday, is on a well-deserved break. Today, our sermonizer is Rima Snyder. Rima is a member of our congregation. She's a retired sound editor and audio engineer, and she's been a member of UU Santa Monica since 2006. She's been in the choir, she's a former worship associate, and she's also served on the music committee, the nominating committee, the hunger task force, and that's just what she does for us in this congregation. She does other things in the greater community. We are really happy to have her with us this morning. Rima loves poetry, which is evidenced in the sermons that she brings to us each year. And in the fall of this year, Rima's going to be leading a small group on poetry as a spiritual practice. So welcome, Rima. We thank and welcome all of our worship leaders, and we welcome you who come from all over the country to be with us this morning. Come whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. It doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come even if you have broken your vow 1,000 times. Come yet again. Come. These are the words of the 13th century Persian poet and Islamic scholar and mystic Rumi. And these are also words that are the lyrics of one of our favorite UU hymns. Unitarian Universalism is not defined by creed or dogma or a particular faith tradition. It's guided by principles that affirm the worth and dignity of every person and encourage an individual search for truth and meaning. We honor the wonder of existence and believe that we are all connected to one another and to the interdependent web of life. Our beliefs are drawn from scripture and from science, nature and philosophy, personal experience and ancient tradition. We are a congregation made up of people who believe in God, people who don't, people who are content to live in the mystery, and people who will never stop searching for answers. In Unitarian Universalism, you can bring your whole authentic self, your full identity, your questioning mind, and your expansive heart. We are diverse in gender identities, ethnicities, sexual orientations, spiritualities, and faiths. We are united in our advocacy for social justice and our covenants with one another. We hope that you find comfort, camaraderie, and inspiration here this morning. Please join me in reciting our covenant and then singing our hymn of praise. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, thus do we covenant with each other.
From all that dwell below the sky,
Good morning. Today's story is about grace. And actually, it's about more than one kind of grace. It's actually the Eastern concept of grace. And it's believed in Eastern religions that there are 5 graces that are necessary to experience life till its fullest. Now, one of those is sight. It's why many religions around the world have prolific art. If you've ever seen the roof of a mosque or stained glass windows in churches, it's the sight that gives you the experience of living. And then there's sound. Now, anyone who's ever heard a gospel choir will let you know they will shake the sinner out of your bones with melodies and rhythms. Sound. Then there are drums that are articulated through many, many cultures that carry the heartbeats of those religious traditions. That sound keeps people going. And then there's smell. It's the smell of Catholic Italian grandmothers sauteing garlic that bring back memories of Sunday dinners. If you've ever been into an Indian store, the smell of the spices, of the masalas, of the sweets, the smells are part of the day-to-day existence. Then there's taste, which I think is everyone's favorite grace. That's Christmas cookies every year. That's roast for Passover. It's chocolate coins for Passover. It's Easter ham. It's all of the things, the foods that make up the fabric of your culture. So these 5 graces are not the traditional given to you by God despite your worthiness. They're the graces that we share with one another to create community. Food and art and music and smells. Grace can be given by anyone, can be stewarded by anyone, and so remember that the grace always lies in you.
Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day.
We have lots to share this morning. First, I invite you to celebrate with me the Worship Associates, a team of about a dozen people who support the person delivering the sermon by writing and presenting the call to worship, the chalice lighting, gathering the announcements, and giving the pitch for our offering. We meet monthly, and as a team, we've learned to speak and write and honor the many identities and spiritual traditions that are represented in our congregation. In the past 6 months, when we have been confined to our homes, we have learned to do all of this remotely. So we celebrate this morning our worship associates who are Abby Arnold, Sue Bickford, Natalie Kahn, Allison Kendall, Leon Henderson McClellan, Dorothy Steinecke, Aubrey Sassoon, Cassie Winters, James Whitaker, and me, Kikanza Nuri Robbins. We're seeking a few more people who would like to join us. If you join us as a worship associate, you'll be trained and supported. You'll be welcomed onto a team of loving and generous people. We help one another every single week. We work together to make our services meaningful. And if you would like to become one of us, send a note to me or send a note to the church office and we'll be in touch. So we celebrate the worship associates. We celebrate Ned Wright. Ned worked on the satellite NEOWISE, which discovered the comet everyone was able to see up in the sky a couple of weeks ago. You know, Ned represents a number of the gentle, unassuming people in our congregation who have great minds and great hearts and who contribute to our world as well as to our community. Ned is one of those people, and we offer him our congratulations. Congratulations, Ned. Another great mind and great heart belonged to James Whitaker. He was elected vice president of the UU Humanist Association. Now, this is a national position. UUHA, the Unitarian Universalist Humanist Association, celebrates and promotes reason, compassion, community within the UU movement and in the wider world. And they do this through scholarship, education, and advocacy. Congratulations, James. James is also celebrating the first year of life with his daughter. So happy birthday, James baby. We hold in the light many people, and by that we hold them in our hearts, we hold them close, we meditate, we hold them in consciousness, we pray for them. Whatever has meaning for you in your spiritual path, we hold them in the light. This morning, we hold in the light our beloved Minister Emeritus, the Reverend Dr. Ernie Pipes, who is still vital in his 90s. So don't worry, there's nothing wrong. We just want to remember him. So we encourage you to send him a note and let him know that in our isolation, we remember him. And finally, we encourage you to reach out to Haigo Salibian. Haigo is the wife of Bill Blake. Bill died unexpectedly a week ago. Haigo and their family are adjusting to a Bill-shaped hole in their world. Bill was at home and they were by his side when he did die. We remember Bill for his contributions to small group ministries in our community, especially the meditation group that he led. Haigo is going to announce soon the plans that she and her family have made for Bill's memorial service. It will be some type of remote service, and we will let you know when that happens. Meanwhile, we hold Haigo and her family in our hearts, and I encourage you to reach out to Haigo.
As we enter a time of silence and reflection together, I invite you to take a comfortable upright seat, perhaps putting both feet on the ground so that you can feel the earth beneath you. You may want to close your eyes, take a couple of deep breaths, and center yourself. May we be mindful of the beauty and fragility of this world that we share with each other and with all living beings on the earth. May we be aware of the joys and sorrows that we all experience in the passing of each day. May we allow ourselves for these next few moments to let go of our expectations, our hopes and regrets, resting in silence together and being grateful for the gift of our lives. Our reading today is by the Unitarian Universalist minister and poet Lynn Unger. The Way It Is. One morning, you might wake up to realize that the knot in your stomach had loosened itself and slipped away, and that the pit of unfilled longing in your heart had gradually, and without you really noticing, been filled in, patched like a pothole, not quite the same as it was, but good enough. And in that moment, it might occur to you that your life, though not the way you planned it, and maybe not even entirely the way you wanted it, is nonetheless, persistently, abundantly, miraculously, exactly what it is. I'm speaking today about the concept of grace. The word grace evokes a wide range of responses and means different things to different people. To live one's life with grace could mean to walk in harmony, to feel compassion for oneself and others, to practice loving kindness as a way of life. In her poem named Grace, Joy Harjo says, "I could say Grace was a woman with time on her hands, or a white buffalo escaped from memory. But in that dingy light it was a promise of balance. We once again understood the talk of animals, and spring was lean and hungry with the hope of children and corn." In a Christian context, grace has a very specific meaning, that of God's freely given and unearned blessing. My personal experience of grace is that of a spontaneous and unexpected feeling of rightness, a feeling of belonging and of the lifting of a burden. I have felt this a few times in my life, and it has always had a profound effect. One time, I remember, happened several years ago when I had a stressful job downtown. I was working as an engineer for a live radio program, and the deadline pressure could be quite difficult. I was riding the bus home, considering leaving the job, and wondering how I could possibly get through another week, when suddenly I had the certain assurance that everything would be all right. I was filled with joy and the sense of connection to a benevolent force or energy. Poet Marie Howe expresses a similar feeling with her poem titled Annunciation. "Even if I don't see it again, nor ever feel it, I know it is, and that if once it hailed me, it ever does. And so it is myself I want to turn in that direction, not as towards a place, but it was a tilting within myself, as one turns a mirror to flash the light to where it isn't. I was blinded like that, and swam in what shone at me, only able to endure it by being no one, and so specifically myself, I thought I'd die from being loved like that." Grace can be spoken of as the granting of a divine blessing, often obtained through prayer. Being in a state of grace is being in harmony with God and the world around you. Others see grace as an inner attribute. The Indian Hindu sage Ramana Maharshi said, "Grace is within you. If it were external, it would be useless." His poetic words about the subject expound on this concept. "When you pray for God's grace, you are like someone neck-deep in water and yet crying for water. It is as good as saying that one neck-deep in water feels thirsty, or that a fish in water feels thirsty, or that water feels thirsty. Grace is always there." The 15th century Indian mystic and poet Kabir expresses something similar in his poem, Inside This Clay Jug. "Inside this clay jug, there are canyons and pine mountains, and the maker of canyons and pine mountains. All 7 oceans are inside, and hundreds of millions of stars. The acid that tests gold is here, and the one who judges jewels, and the music that comes from the strings that no one touches, and the source of all water. If you want the truth, I will tell you the truth. Friend, listen, the God whom I love is inside." Personally, I find the idea of grace helpful in my everyday world. The smallest glimpse of beauty can lift me out of my own concerns and bring me a peace that I think of as a kind of grace. I think we've all had this experience, though it may be easily overlooked and too quickly forgotten. Most of the time, we're preoccupied with thoughts of the past or the future, not living mindfully in the present moment. Saints and holy people in many different religious traditions are seen as being in a state of constant grace, without sin and in harmony with the divine. I see this as similar to a state of complete mindfulness, alive to the true possibilities and joy of life. According to the Tibetan Buddhist teachings of Chogyam Trungpa, all of us have within us an inherent state of basic goodness, simply by virtue of being alive as human beings. He says, "We experience glimpses of goodness all the time, but we often fail to acknowledge them. When we see a bright color, we are witnessing our own inherent goodness. When we hear a beautiful sound, we are hearing our own basic goodness. Every human being has a basic nature of goodness which is undiluted and unconfused." In these next two poems, you'll hear examples of ordinary life being elevated to a higher level of being, of ordinary people existing in what could be called a state of grace. The first poem is Our Lady of the Rest Stop by Judith Sornberger. Last time I saw her, no kidding, she was descending from a beat-up Winnebago in the Sandhills just north of Hyannis, Nebraska, wearing blue like always, except now it's a wind-bleached denim sundress, and this time there's no halo except around everything in her vicinity: the kids pulling fish from the river, the fish themselves, their fins like pearly wings, the vials of wild plum wine someone has left in the shallows cooling, the cooing pair of doves pecking at pebbles. And when she shakes your hand, it too starts glowing, not so you can see it, but so you know finally how good it is to have a palm and fingers. And all you want to do is spread that sheen on everything you can get your hands on, to make it feel like it's just been washed in brightest water, as though it is a fish that dreamed itself into an angel. Meditation in Wyatt's by Albert Huffsticler. It's been over a year now since I had my mystical experience, sitting among the old folks in Wyatt's cafeteria eating my fried chicken. Over a year since I saw those silver lines extending from my heart to every person in the room, linking us. And I knew that those lines existed in another dimension, and that those lines were poetry. Now I sit here in the same place once again, and the old folks are moving through the serving line or seated over their dinners, chatting in their flat, small voices. There's a resonance in the room, and those silver lines are moving between us as before. And watching them, I know that poetry has a subtle existence that is prior to any word, sound, meaning, prior to anything now existing. An old man at the next table bends double, coughing, then straightens with a gasp, and the talk goes on. The connections between people portrayed in this poem remind me of the interdependent web mentioned in the 7th UU principle. Mary Oliver says in one of her essays, "Do you think there is anything not attached by its unbreakable cord to everything else?" In these times of fear, anger, uncertainty, and even despair, it's helpful to remember our connections to each other. Poetry helps me to feel this connection, my relation to all people and to the natural world as well. It reminds me that there is beauty and mystery yet in the world, and that despite the widespread injustice and heartbreak we've experienced in these past few months, there are still things to be grateful for. The word grace is related to thanks and to gratitude. Many different programs for developing joy in one's life point out that the people who are happiest are usually those expressing gratitude for the good things in life. Several people I know keep gratitude journals, writing down things that they are grateful for at the end of each day. James Baraz writes in his book Awakening Joy, "If you have the intention to awaken gratitude, over time it will gradually become the natural rhythm of your heart, strong enough to hold even suffering." There are many wonderful poems written about gratitude. I will leave you with excerpts from 2 of them that describe scenes of tranquility and beauty. May they bring you peace. The first is from E. E. Cummings, from one of his most famous poems. I thank you, God, for most this amazing day, for the leaping greenly spirits of trees and a blue true dream of sky, and for everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes. And from Behaving by Tamara Madison. The warm late summer afternoon has spun down to a balmy evening. A brassy sunset casts light from somewhere in the sea. This light flows around the trunks of sycamores arrayed in a row and through their fluttering branches. The air is tender on my bare arms and legs, and the world feels for this moment bathed in grace. Blessed be.
We even have a poem for the offering. For our offering, we have a blessing of thanksgiving written by Naomi King. Let us join our hands and hearts in gratitude, where we have the abundance of our lives before us. We remember on this day of bounty all of those who do not have enough, who are afraid, who are lonely, who suffer. We wish for the abundance of this world to be shared, for fear to become love, for the lonely to feel welcomed, and for the suffering to know rest and joy. For the labors, the love, the care that gave us the delights of this day and every day, we say thanks. For the nourishment of our spirit that challenges, that strengthens us, and the friends we have on the journey, we sing thanks. For all that is our lives, for these good gifts, we whisper thanks. Overflowing with gratitude, let us shout, thank you, and let us give. We give 50% of our offering this month to Camp de Benneville Pines. And Carl Lasowski will tell you a little bit about the camp, and the information on how to give will be on your screen. So listen and watch and learn about the camp and remember how to give. Give generously. Thank you.
We come together for more than ourselves. During the month of August, 50% of our offering will go to Camp de Benneville Pines, the church retreat in the San Bernardino Mountains that we share with UU churches across the Southwest Conference. UU Santa Monica members have been going to Camp de Benneville for many years, finding respite from chaotic LA life for a week, a weekend, hiking, singing, meditating under the Jeffrey pines that surround camp. My family and I have been going to de Benneville for many years as well. Our kids always loved the freedom and the fun up there, while the grown-ups enjoyed the relaxation and community. However, because of COVID-19, this year de Benneville has been virtually empty. Yet it does cost money to maintain the place, quite a bit of money actually, about $50,000 a month. Camp is quickly exhausting its reserves, so churches like ours are stepping up to save this precious resource. Camp Director Janet James says that if each church can give in donations what it normally spends in registration, camp will survive. So let's keep Camp de Benneville Pines alive for ourselves, for our children, and our future. There are 3 ways to give. You can mail a check to the church office, remembering to put de Benneville in the memo line. You can use the Make a Donation link on the UUSM.org webpage. A good way to donate is using your smartphone. You can text 982-0209, then in the body of the text enter a dollar amount followed by a space, and GCC, which stands for Generous Congregation Contribution. For example, you might enter 20 GCC for a $20 donation. On your first time using this interface, you will be prompted to set it up. After that, it'll be simple. The number again, 844-982-0209. Easy text giving makes a big difference. Your donation of any amount is gratefully accepted.
This service has ended. Our service in the wider world continues. As you travel through the week, I wish for each of you a sense of peace and belonging. May grace and gratitude help you to find your place in this marvelous and broken world. In the words of the Irish priest and poet John O'Donoghue, may the nourishment of the earth be yours, may the clarity of light be yours, may the fluency of the ocean be yours, may the protection of the ancestors be yours. And so may a slow wind work these words of love around you, an invisible cloak to mind your life. Blessed be, and Amen.